So, Mike, I appreciate you joining us. Welcome to The Pulse. The last time we had you speak with our members was at the beginning of the pandemic, which was nearly 2 years ago. A lot has happened since then, not the least of which is the impact of the pandemic on the economy and the insurance industry. How did the NAIC respond? What were the big issues you faced as an organization?
Well, it's really great to be with you. Hard to believe it's been 2 years since we last did this, and I believe that was in person. And I think none of us were prepared for what has turned out to be kind of a 2-year odyssey through a global pandemic. And we've had a chance, really, particularly over the last part of last year, to reflect on the NAIC's response and our members' response to kind of this unprecedented environment we found ourselves in. And I think overall, we are really pleased with how state insurance regulators stepped up to serve their communities in what have been extraordinarily challenging times. I mean, the range of issues, some of which I know we'll get into a lot more detail, span expected things like health insurance issues, how to deal with testing, how to deal with getting access to vaccinations, sort of how to deal with telemedicine, which we saw an explosion of during the pandemic. How do you react to a world turned upside down in terms of social habits? People no longer driving, people being in their homes working and not in their offices working, and what were the ramifications of that for insurance? How do you respond to a virtual touchless environment where, agents were no longer getting fingerprinted or testing in person? And in every one of these cases, you saw, I think, very swift response from state insurance regulators, very coordinated, very cohesive in pulling together and coming up with real workable solutions that were not only responsive to consumers, but also, recognized what the industry was trying to do and still, serving consumers during these extraordinary days. At the same time, it was like living 2 years out of the Old Testament, because, in the midst of a pandemic, we also had a historically active hurricane season. We had unprecedented wildfires out west. We had, this incredible derecho in the Midwest. It was just sort of one thing after another. And I could not be more proud of the NAIC as an organization, but particularly our members. They were constantly on the front line and always responsive. And we're in the process of applying some of the lessons learned, which I expect we'll get to. But overall, I think both our system and I think even the sector performed admirably.
As we know, macro issues like the pandemic always have a way of landing in the insurance industry. There are questions about whether insurers should be picking up business interruption losses from COVID-19, for instance. Where are we on that issue, and what other areas of the industry were impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, that's again, I think that seems to be kind of an ongoing issue, particularly with respect to the business interruption. And, I spoke to one sort of collecting those lessons learned. And I think one of the lessons were there are coverage gaps in areas where, at least from a consumer perspective, they were not expecting them. The NAIC, took a position with respect to Congress when they were considering some bills that would have retroactively rewritten policies to cover those types of pandemic risks and losses. And, I think we expressed concerns, particularly from, a solvency perspective as to the consequences of that. Beyond that, we've certainly been engaged with Congress as they've looked to business interruption, possible TRIA-like solutions. And that is still, an ongoing discussion in Congress. We've seen, litigation deal with some of these issues. By and large, we as a membership don't get involved in the coverage dispute portions of that. But I think certainly both for the industry and for regulators, there has to be a recognition that, there's a significant risk that was exposed that is still uncovered as part of this, pandemic. And, we need to address it in some manner or another. And regulators are ready to be at the table, ready to offer at least guidance on possible solutions. And we'll continue to stay tuned as to what Congress does there. As terms of other areas and other coverages that were impacted, I suspect we'll get into things like, auto, but one that we're keeping our eye on is certainly cyber and a lot of the explosion of cyber coverages over the last 5 to 10 years, and how those might be impacted by the increased risks that came from working at home, and what we see as an increasing environment of cyber attacks and ransomware attacks, and that is a coverage where I think there's still more to be learned and understood in terms of how they're managing those risks and what the regulatory responsibilities are.
Mike, you mentioned issues related to the auto insurance market. We saw changes in driver behavior during the pandemic. Usage-based insurance and automation are also emerging issues. What is the NAIC focused on in the auto market?
Yeah, there have been a lot of changes, and again, the pandemic has just, it's been a roller coaster ride really for our membership. And, as I mentioned, we saw initially in the pandemic a drop off in usage. That's certainly starting to correct itself as people return to normality, at least the new normal. But at the same time, at least some of the data we're seeing is an increase in the severity and cost side of the accidents that are occurring. So a couple things. One, the insurer, our members continue to look at the data, and to some extent, what happened during the last 2 years, might be an anomaly in terms of the usage. And I think we want to figure that out, because what we don't want to do is make huge adjustments to, rating assumptions and methodologies that have been in place for, decades to reflect what happened in the last 2 years, only to have to 2 years from now do, whipsaw in the other direction, as we're seeing this huge cost curve come back up. So I think, our membership are certainly being thoughtful about it. We did see, appropriately so, a number of companies step up and provide refunds or premium holidays associated with sort of lack of usage of vehicles. So that I think that was the appropriate step, and certainly one that our members encouraged and continue to monitor to make sure that they were appropriate. So that's and whether that continues, again, I think we'll have to see with what happens with the pandemic, and again, with respect to sort of the usage-based models for pricing going forward. That was something that was beginning to develop before the pandemic, and again, I think our members are looking at these models and really trying to understand them, because they go beyond just pure usage. There's a lot of other data that goes into this. And as we've talked about, sort of what other data, how it's being used, how it's being analyzed, what impact it has. Could it be a proxy for geography or something like that, are all things that we're looking at.
Similarly, there are a lot of changes in the homeowners market, not the least of which is the value of homes due to inflation. What are the big issues for the NAIC?
Yeah, again, I think there are some lessons to be learned coming out of the pandemic from the homeowners market. One of the hardest, and I know Commissioner Conway, my home state commissioner here in Colorado, is living through one of those and using what has happened here in Colorado with the wildfire losses that we had, the horrific losses we had up near Boulder. What happened is insurers or the policyholders started to go through the claim process and quickly found that the insured value of their homes, which they may have insured decades ago, had significantly increased, both in terms of the market value, but also, the costs related to replacement. And so it gives us all, both at a regulator and an industry, an opportunity to do some outreach and education and really encourage policyholders and consumers to take a look at your coverages, take a look, just because it's those things do not get automatically adjusted to reflect market values and replacement costs. So let the very hard and sad lesson being learned by others not be lost, and let's use this as an opportunity, and that's something again that I think we can work together on.
In February, we had Dr. Phil Klotzbach from Colorado State University on Pulse to discuss climate change, natural catastrophes, and their impact on insurance. Now, climate and resiliency is a major issue for the NAIC as well. In fact, on the October Pulse, Maryland Commissioner Bahrain mentioned work being done by the NAIC to understand the impact of climate change on underwriting risk from both a quantitative and qualitative perspective. What can you tell us about those efforts and what insurers need to know and do?
Yeah, well, I think if you asked any insurance company CEO, especially on the P&C side, what's in their top three areas of operational risk, climate risk, would be in that. And that's certainly true of insurance regulators as well. I know you and I both call Colorado home, and we've seen just these horrific wildfires take hold of the West, and again, climate-related natural catastrophe, regardless of causation. We've seen an increase in severity throughout the last few years. So it's absolutely something that our membership continues to engage on. I think part of it, and we had an opportunity, prompted by the direction given by President Biden to Treasury to kind of conduct a study on potential gaps in insurance regulation around climate, to engage with Treasury and the FIO office to talk about not only what we're doing looking forward, but what we've done historically. And I think part of the message is we've been engaged on climate risk for quite some time. I mean, we celebrated our 150th anniversary. And if you go back to our very first meeting in 1871, they were talking about climate-related risks and how to manage those, and the evolving science around them. And throughout sort of our history, that's been something both from a response side, a mitigation side, a financial exposure side, state insurance regulators, out of necessity and need, have been very attuned to. And we've highlighted in our response to FIO, the work that we've done, changes we've made to RBC to account for natural catastrophe risks, work being done in ORSIS to capture what companies are doing. The work on the macroprudential side to sort of look holistically. And so part of the message is we're engaged, we've been engaged, but we also have, I think, really stepped up in terms of elevating this issue to the very highest levels of our organization. As you mentioned, we've got an executive task force. This year, it's led by Commissioner Laura from California and Commissioner Altmaier from Florida. Two big states, two very different states politically, but they share a common shared concern around the impact of climate-related risks on their market. And I know pretty much every state in between shares those concerns. And we have a number of work streams. Commissioner Bahrain leads one of them that is looking at a number of different issues. And we view this not just as a solvency exercise in capturing the risks, but we're equally focused on the technology aspects of it, the mitigation parts of it, how we can work, at a state, local, federal level to really prevent and reduce the amount of damage that results from these natural catastrophes. I mean, we've seen significant studies already coming out of some of the wildfires out west that fairly cost-effective efforts could have reduced some of those losses significantly. So, there's some real opportunity there that we see working with the sector in really educating and engaging consumers, as well as continuing to do the work we need to do on the solvency side.
Geopolitics and the economy have a knock-on effect on the industry as well, with inflation on the rise, energy prices soaring, and the uncertainty of the outcome of the war in Eastern Europe. Are regulators concerned about the impact of all this on our industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how could we not be, and again, just to talk about, a surreal environment where we've got, a land war raging in Europe. Again, I think most of us would not think we'd see that in our lifetime, but, it's another disturbing reality of the world we're in. And of course, that's on top of what has been existing volatility in the market, ongoing longstanding interest rate pressures. All of that, of course, has a financial impact on the insurance sector, something that we monitor, in a real-time basis. And, thus far, I think, by virtue of the regulations that are in place, the oversight that's in place at a national, state, national, and international level, the sector is well positioned to, I'd say, at least endure, some of these challenges. Certainly, thriving has been an issue, particularly, as the pressures on the investment side come to bear, and the margins, particularly on the P&C side, continue to get pressured. We're very attuned to those solvency issues, and I'd like to say, we've got easy solutions to these issues, but I think some of them will just take their time to work through. This is where, again, I think the benefit of a regulatory system that encourages thinking and planning for the long term and thinking and planning for the worst is borne some fruit, and that we've got a pretty resilient, strongly reserved insurance sector here in the U.S. that I think is going to do okay under these circumstances.
Recently, AAIS attended the Florida Insurance Market Summit, and we conducted a survey where we polled the attendees about the issues they were most concerned about. And as you might imagine, it wasn't close. Litigation topped the list. Not to pick on Florida, this issue and social inflation pops up in other jurisdictions as well. But what is the NAIC's position on frivolous lawsuits and tort reform?
Yeah, the NAIC itself really doesn't take a position on those kinds of issues. We certainly defer to our members, given the uniqueness of each state's system, both from a tort perspective and a lawsuit perspective. But I know it's something that our members continue to be very engaged in. And you mentioned Florida. I know that has been top of mind for Commissioner Altemeyer as he looks at sort of that marketplace and some of the drivers of the premium increases. And my experience as a former regulator from Pennsylvania, as we were dealing with tort related issues is our members serve as a trusted, respected voice for the legislatures, which really are sort of the primary place for these discussions when it comes to drivers of cost and accessibility and affordability. And those are big concerns for all of us. I think we are seeing in a number of instances in a number of markets, particularly as it relates to climate related risks, certainly increased costs, and in a lot of cases, significantly decreased accessibility and availability. And that's a problem for all of us. I mean, it's, the proposition of the insurance sector is, we're there to share risk and spread risk and, sort of take the good and the bad. And, we've got significant parts of the country which, do not have access to the insurance market. And that's something that should be of concern to all of us.
Another trend in our society affecting insurance is the legalization of cannabis. And as you know, AAIS has been leading the way on policy language related to cannabis risk, often at the request of state regulators. Are you happy with the way the industry is responding to this growing risk? Pardon the pun.
Well, it's about high time, pardon the pun. No, again, we actually have a cannabis task force at the NAIC that started up a few years ago, really in response to the reality that, this was a significant growing business sector that, needed access to the insurance market. And the insurance market, wants to be able to step up and provide those coverages. And I think by and large, my sense of our membership is, sort of where those markets are operating legally at a state level, there's receptivity to, providing access to the insurance market, facilitating it as much as possible. Certainly here, in Colorado, we've seen that, in California and other states. I think part of the challenge still is, at the federal level, and I know Congress is taking this issue on again. And I think to some of those, to the extent we can address some of those financial issues, cross-border financial issues, which seem to be the biggest barriers right now for real engagement, we'll make progress. But I think this is a real opportunity, entrepreneurial opportunity for the sector to step up and provide, coverage for a burgeoning marketplace.
Another key issue for the NAIC and a hot topic at the February meeting with state regulators is data innovation, as you previously mentioned, cybersecurity, but also the H Committee. What can you tell us about the H Committee?
Yeah, well, I give, again, a credit to our officers and leadership for the vision that they had in, putting forward the idea of creating a letter committee dedicated to cyber technology issues. As those of us who were around the NAIC know, we have these letter committees, which represent sort of the highest level of engagement of our membership, and they really haven't changed in more than, I think, 20 years was the last time we had a new letter committee. So for us, creating a letter committee on these, dedicated to these issues is a pretty big deal. And, should be a signal to the sector that, we're very serious about engagement on this. And this is one that Commissioner Borain from Maryland is leading and doing an amazing job of really trying to make a lot of progress very quickly. And I think, that starts with just, looking internally at all of the existing work streams and committees and task forces that we have that touch on cyber and technology and big data, and kind of coordinating those and pulling them where it makes sense under this new H committee. And as we go through that, I think she's in the process, and I certainly don't want to steal her thunder going into a national meeting of, identifying some key areas where we're going to engage and really advance state-based ideas, state-based initiatives in terms of things like, where we go with our AI principles, certainly cybersecurity, data security, all of those are major issues for our membership. And I think this is one of those existential, sort of issues that, our members recognize they need to get right. They need to be engaged on, because if they don't, then, others will step into that opening. And we truly believe, state-based solutions that are tailored to our markets, are tailored to our consumers, are the right way to go. But there's a lot of work to be done here. Certainly, we see at the international level a lot of activity, and there we just want to make sure that we are advancing U.S. state-based ideas at sort of the international table as well.
Mike, as you know, AAIS developed the OpenIDL blockchain platform to help streamline regulatory reporting. Since we successfully tested OpenIDL on the NAIC data call last year, looking at BI exposures for COVID-19, we had growing support from state regulators and major insurance carriers regarding the platform. How does the NAIC view OpenIDL and its ability to provide regulators with the info they need while still protecting carrier data?
Yeah, well, this is a really important issue, an area for our membership, and I certainly take the opportunity to congratulate you and applaud the initiative you all have taken in the space in identifying a true need both on an industry side and a regulatory side, and coming to the table with some solutions. And really that's what our membership is looking for is solutions. And they don't have to be purely regulatory, state, regulatory driven solutions. We're looking for any ideas that, as you say, kind of balance our need for data and information in an efficient way, as well as some of the concerns of the industry on the confidentiality, data security side. So it's something that we welcome. It's something that I know the H Committee is looking at. I know we've got a couple of internal NAIC initiatives going on where we're trying to learn from what others have done, so we can apply some of those solutions to our own efforts to bring greater efficiency, greater effectiveness, and modernization to our support of sort of the back office portion of our state-based system here. So I think there is a huge amount of opportunity and interest as to where we can take this next, and again welcome your engagement.
Well, those of us who've been around the industry long enough know that we can and should do more to be more inclusive and more diverse. In fact, it was the focus of a Pulse session we hosted with Missouri Commissioner Lindsley Myers and Connecticut Commissioner Mays last year. What's the latest on the NAIC work being done here?
Yeah, and it's something I'm very passionate about at an NAIC level, and again, in any opportunity, I can talk about sort of the charge that our membership gave to us as part of kind of the overarching initiative on race and insurance. Their charge to NAIC was, you need to lead by example. You need to set the standard in terms of DE&I culture within the NAIC and recruiting and leadership development, affinity groups. And, we have done a lot of work over the last year, and I congratulate, the entire team we have here at the NAIC who've dedicated themselves to advancing our commitment to DE&I and really leading by example. We're going to host our second DE&I conference this year in Kansas City. Today, we've kind of just limited it to NAIC and our members, but it's something we hope maybe next year that we get to roll out industry wide and really have it serve as a kind of a real opportunity for the entire sector to come together and share best practices and share what's working and share what's not working. And I think that's where our membership on the external part of this have been very clear that we recognize this is a journey for all of us, and we all certainly acknowledge when it comes to the insurance sector, we have a lot of room for improvement when it comes to creating an inclusive environment that certainly reflects more diversity in our leadership ranks, in our boards. But we're not, at a point, where any of us gain anything by sort of naming and shaming. I think we need to just learn and grow together. So one of our work streams is entirely dedicated to, what's happening in the sector and how we can do just that. And we've got a few work streams that are looking at what's happening within the P&C industry, the life industry, health industry. Give a lot of credit to Director Cameron, who's made, sort of his focus on, let's figure out some of the root causes, particularly when it comes to barriers to entry into the insurance marketplace. What's limiting financial inclusion? What's limiting people's interest, particularly from underserved communities and communities of color from getting involved in the insurance sector? So, if we can identify some of those, root causes, some of those barriers, then I think we can start to really talk about, more surgical focused solutions that get us the results we're all looking for. And, having worked on the industry side, I know there is a commitment there by the vast majority, if not all companies, to, commit to diversity and, get their products out to a broader marketplace. And so I hope, and it's one that, I know it's a hope our membership serves. It's an area where we all have an opportunity to work to the work together to come to the table. And to my earlier, point about coming to the table with, solutions and ideas and not, reasons why progress is impossible or, the way it is the way it is. And again, I think we're seeing some of that commitment. Certainly welcome seeing more of it. And hopefully this will be one, when we talk about next, we'll be able to celebrate our joint progress.
Well, Mike, always terrific catching up with you. You have a lot on your plate, and I appreciate you taking the time to meeting with us. On behalf of myself and all of our members, thank you very much for that update.
Well, it's been a pleasure to visit with you virtually. And again, I'm looking forward to doing this in person next time, but it's been great. Take care.